When it comes to the Beatles, every accusation is a confession. When I heard from Martha Gellhorn from P.O. Box 1234, Belize City, Belize, 1990 or so, she professed an inability to accept the truth of what I was saying. That cannot be. This was a woman who saw the liberation of Dachau. Now, every accusation is a confession when it comes to the Beatles in many, many dimensions. Wilzel Brom was in a Gurdjieff cult with Walter Hodarewski, who I met at Claymont when I visited at the invitation of Robert Fripp. Zell had been saying in the Poconos Mountains before AIDS happened, what would you think of a scheme to transform the human race by injecting the blood? And then ran the Venus flytrap operation with the help of Pittsburghers on Mount Desert Island in the 80s while working at Jackson Immunogenetic Laboratories, which I proved. And they were libeling me with the help of an undercover prostitute who had been hired by the Jewish community when I was in grade school to make a seedy understory about the way I was kidnapped, gassed, brutally battered, tortured, poisoned, mind raped, and hideously set up for the glee club of Louis Lapham when they pretended to find the script that they themselves had written. In other words, I was an expendable symbol toy for the American administration. So Zell had prior knowledge of the AIDS attack. That's perfectly obvious. And the more you look at the evidence, the more clear and more perfectly obvious that is. So if anybody could have anything, it was intercept a public health catastrophe in time to save many, many, many people. But the Beatles were saying things like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This works so beautifully, man, we're going to get tons of money. And so they went along with it, which they had actually designed. And the trick of the trade was to pull Lennon's Houdini. But there were also, when you look at the way that the counterculture operated, like the way that they went digging for an implant about tying a girl up and probing her with a carrot, which was a soundtrack they imposed on my mind for Yoko Ono's Neva Corporation, the Revolution Number 9 hostage tampering that Jaime Carbonell. I mean, how would this girl with this soundtrack end up at Natural Language Laboratories at Carnegie Mellon if it wasn't all worked out? So Swimmer and Carbonell had it all worked out. And they kidnapped somebody from Pitt because it was a private versus public institution. Václav Havel protested my trying to get help from a private research corporation and so forth. He said, we don't tamper with private research conducted by our main man, George Bush, who used me as sort of driftwood from the USC Center. And the fundamentalist tripartite was in play. Ron was cannibalating with Michael Foucault, who committed suicide by AIDS. He was one of the Bushnell martyrs. And cannibalating with Reagan and then Ron Contra with the help of Nosferatu of Israel. So it was a fundamentalist tripartite system who targeted the supernova rave when they went and demolished Gaza. And what they're doing is cheapening human life, making martyrdom normal. You're supposed to accept death for Donald Trump and Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan for the planet that we should leave with gratitude. So, and he was set up by Queen Elizabeth and them. They used the names Elizabeth and Bloomin' Meanie, Jeller Meanie, Bloominis. And they played all of these Stratego games, pub crawl people, combining names and stuff. So you get Ronnie Zinski, and Casper Owlski. And they think that, there's no political constituency for protecting the public. It's all private recording artists. They make Zappa say, "Oh, say irregular and vulgar things so you'll be considered neat." Because they had implanted a neurotrauma that they wanted to extrude from so that they could say, "I was the enemy within, I was the enemy within," bursting, and justify the murder of the Kennedys, which the script was about. And you can only lie for so long. I mean, helping the people who did that is obviously very perverted. And that's what Fripp and King Crimson have done from the very beginning, have been to help and advocate for these people through the Gurdjieff Fourth Way Society. And they claim that these people killed Lenin. That's who they're helping and advocating for. So the Gurdjieff Society was also in occupied Paris. They were connubulating with the Gestapo. That's how they survived in occupied Paris. And he knew Stalin. He had Stalin's mustache, that Gurdjieff fellow. And he was greatly liked by the Ouspensky people around the New Age magazine that came out around World War I. That had the nuncio who was friends of D.W. Griffith and Mussolini, and Diaghilev, and Blythe Sanders, who was a specialist in con artistry from literature and cinema, how to convince people of things that weren't true, get them to accept it for entertainment. And I'll give you an example of the problem. George Galloway, man of the people, Geo Galloway. He says half it out with him. There's nothing, you can't scrape his nose in the truth. He will never, no, he will never admit that I was in Washington, D.C. with Reagan's attorneys on the day he claims he was shot. He won't go into the details. There's some really interesting details. He'll never admit that happened. It's a verifiable reality. Everybody who was there would admit it, but it won't get on Galloway. And the reason is because the attorney's card read, "There's no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury believes." And his whole take on the great silence of Lenin, he wouldn't be able to even show his face in a debate about what happened when Donald Trump was Van Gogh. So if he admitted that I was in D.C. with Reagan's attorneys from Mount Desert Island on the day that Reagan claims he was shot, he comes on waves to me the night before. Galloway will never admit that. He'll break the camera. He'll run crying in his diapers. You think Biden was bad when he was pooping his pants. Where do you see Galloway when it comes up on Piers Morgan?